Mentioning the Vietnam War is the fastest way to start a fight in any military circle. We argue about justified intervention, strategic blunders, or war crimes. But here's the question that should keep every military strategist awake at night. How did a nation of peasant farmers, people using recycled tires for sandals and bamboo for fortifications, force the greatest superpower in human history to just pack up and leave? The common narrative says it was a clash of ideologies, capitalism versus communism. That is a lie. If you keep believing the communist boogeyman story, you're missing the most successful psychological blueprint ever used in modern warfare. You're looking at a chessboard while the opponent is playing a completely different game. Welcome to the club. Let's look at the ghost variable. Everyone else was trained to ignore. To understand the stubborn spirit of the Vietnamese, you have to stop seeing them as a Cold War pawn and start seeing them as the protagonist of a story that started 1,000 years before the United States even existed. Imagine being told it's a crime, a literal punishable crime, to even call yourself Vietnamese. That was life under the French. By 1884, the French didn't just occupy the land, they tried to delete the identity. They divided the country into 3 Kai, Tonkin, Annam, and Cochinchina, specifically to make sure the word Vietnam would disappear from the map. When you realize that, the entire war stops being about Marxism and starts being about the basic human right to exist. Here's my hot take. The West didn't go to Vietnam to save democracy. They went there to save a mafia protection racket called the French Empire. We love to talk about the bravery of colonial missions, but when you strip it back, it was just systematic cultural erasure fueled by rubber and rice exports. If you weren't a puppet, you were a ghost. While the world watched the battlefields, the real revolution was being brewed in the coffee houses of Paris. This is the ghost variable in action. A young man named Nguyen Sinh Cung, later known as Ho Chi Minh, wasn't radicalized in a jungle. He was radicalized in the heart of the West. He worked as a pastry chef, a photo retoucher, and a stoker on a ship. He saw the liberty, equality, and fraternity the French preached at home, and he realized they were the very weapons he could use to destroy their empire abroad. He went to the Versailles Peace Conference in 1919, wearing a rented suit, trying to present a petition for Vietnamese civil rights to President Woodrow Wilson. Wilson, the man who talked about self-determination, wouldn't even see him. That is the moment the door to the West slammed shut, and the door to the East, to Lenin and Moscow, was kicked open. Not because of a love for Karl Marx, but because the democratic world decided that a Vietnamese man wasn't worth 5 minutes of their time. Now we're told Ho Chi Minh was a hardline Soviet puppet from day one, but that's not even the crazy part. In 1945, Ho was actually trying to be America's best friend. He was working with the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. This is a detail they don't teach in basic history. OSS agents like Archimedes Patty were actually training Ho Chi Minh's guerrillas to fight the Japanese. They gave him weapons. They treated him for malaria. When Ho Chi Minh stood up in Hanoi to declare independence on September 2, 1945, he didn't quote the Communist Manifesto. He stood on a podium with American officers and started his speech with, "All men are created equal. They are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights." He was quoting the American Declaration of Independence. America had its George Washington of the East right there. The OSS agents on the ground saw it. They celebrated with him. They wrote reports saying, "This guy isn't a puppet, he's a patriot." But the exclusive club in Washington chose a dying French empire over a potential ally because they were terrified of a label. They chose the communist tag over the reality on the ground. If you ignore the redacted reality, you lose the entire lesson. We didn't fight communism in Vietnam. We fought a ghost of our own making. When the French failed at Dien Bien Phu, the US didn't step in to stop an invasion. They stepped in to stop an election. The 1954 Geneva Accords promised a nationwide election to reunite the country. But President Eisenhower knew that if the people voted, Ho Chi Minh would win with 80% of the vote. So we supported a corrupt regime in the South, led by Ngo Dinh Diem, a man who was so out of touch with his own people that he criminalized Buddhism in a 90% Buddhist country. This is where the POV shifts from the palaces to the dirt. Look at the Cu Chi tunnels. This wasn't just guerrilla warfare, it was a total rejection of the physical world. Imagine living, eating, and giving birth in a tunnel system that stretched 200 miles. Schools, hospitals, kitchens, all right under the boots of US soldiers. The Americans would drop B-52 payloads that turned the surface into a moonscape, and 30 minutes later, the Vietnamese would emerge from a hole the size of a dinner plate, grab their rifles, and go back to work. You cannot defeat a population that has decided the ground itself is their ally. Here at Old World Daily, we dive into these buried truths because history isn't just about what happened, it's about why we were told a different story. The American strategy was body counts. They thought if they killed enough people, the Vietnamese would quit. But the Vietnamese POV was different. As Ho Chi Minh famously told the French, "You can kill 10 of my men for everyone I kill of yours, but even at those odds, you will lose and I will win." This wasn't math. This was a contest of wills, where the Vietnamese had nothing left to lose, and the Americans had everything to lose, including their soul. After the war ended in 1975, the dominoes didn't fall. Thailand didn't fall. The Philippines didn't fall. In fact, within 4 years, Communist Vietnam was at war with Communist Cambodia and Communist China. The monolithic threat we spent 20 years fighting was actually a collection of ancient rivals who only teamed up because we gave them a common enemy. We call Vietnam a tragic mistake. But when you realize the entire war could have been avoided with a single handshake in 1945, or a single meeting in 1919, it stops being a mistake and starts looking like a deliberate choice to ignore the truth. Send this to a friend who still thinks history is a simple good guys versus bad guys story. Because the real story, it's about how many Ho Chi Minhs are out there right now, reaching out for a hand while we prepare for a fist. The cycle hasn't stopped. And here at Old World Daily, we're just getting started. The story isn't over. It's just beginning in a different corner of the world. Are you paying attention?